Hey there, and welcome back to another My Hero Academia Vigilantes video. And today we're going to be talking about the latest episode to drop, which is also the finale of Season 1, Episode 13, What a Man Takes With Him. For me, this season's definitely had some ups and downs in terms of the narrative and character choices that have been made, but things have well and truly picked up in the back third of the season. So I guess I'm feeling a little bit melancholy the season's actually ending, although, with that being said, we are going to be getting the final season of the mainline show coming this October, so there's that to look forward to later in the year, isn't there? Regardless though, nothing else for it but to jump into the episode. Let's go. We start off the episode with a cute little scene where Koichi and Pop are just hanging out in the penthouse with Koichi doing his chores, and Pop being all excited watching the video of her performance at Narufest on repeat, and bragging about how she's finally gotten fan mail. A whole 3 letters! One of which is from the X-Men middle school boys, so technically that one doesn't really count, but she's still excited. Just a fun little scene. Nothing big in terms of plot or character development, just a fun slice of life. The intro plays, and when we return, it's to find a praying mantis villain terrorizing the streets. Another one of those full transformation ones like the electric eel. I'll be honest, considering that these are becoming more and more of a problem, you'd kind of expect one of the really big name heroes would start to get involved. This does feel like something an All Might or an Endeavor would be interested in dealing with, or at least investigating. It's not like this is just some small fry trigger event anymore. This is actually a big deal. Anyway, the mantis is smashing stuff and gets ready to kill somebody before the crawler arrives on the scene with a longer than usual dramatic speech, and they have a bit of a stare down. And this part was very funny, because once again you're left with the idea that now the crawler's on his own, he needs to level up, and this is going to be his big test. Can he deal with it by himself? And then it jump cuts to the answer of no, he can't. This thing's extremely strong and fast enough to keep up with him, and it's only the timely arrival of Captain Celebrity, who showboats and then one-shots the villain, that saves the day. One day, Koichi is going to be able to be useful in battles, but it seems that's a dream for Season 2. Also, Koichi's hoodie! He lost one of the All Might hair thingies. Oh man, his priceless merch taking a beating once again. Captain Celebrity then invites himself over to Koichi's place, and whilst they were on the street, he was complimentary about the crawler and thanked him for being a good Samaritan and helping him out where he can. In reality, he's actually annoyed with him. Not because he thinks that only heroes should be fighting villains and that vigilantes have no place in modern hero society, no. It's because he's lazy and he's tired of having to come in and save Koichi from every single villain. Because the reality is that the more recent trigger villains have all been the permanent transformation type that Koichi can't overcome on his own. So inevitably, he runs into trouble and Captain Celebrity or another hero has to rush in before he gets himself killed. Just looking at it from that point of view, yeah, it kind of would be annoying. That being said, it's not really an altruistic reason. Celebrity is just salty because Makoto's working him to the bone and he wants to rest. I have to admit, it's really refreshing to have a character who's just so selfish and a hero for all the wrong reasons. Complaining about doing hero work, annoyed that he's so popular and so he has to do all these things that Makoto scheduled for him, scoffing at the idea of doing an unpaid appearance for the sake of the local community. I think it's just nice to get a prominent character who feels like a more realistic take on what a pro hero would actually be like, as opposed to every man and his dog being obsessed with justice and being a true hero. On top of that, it was nice to see Koichi getting some proper personality growth here. While he was still outclassed by the villains on the battlefield, at the same time, he was able to hold his own somewhat more with Captain Celebrity, who in their early encounters would just make fun of him and leave him feeling kind of stupid. Here, Koichi got his own back. When Makoto arrives, Celebrity panics and accidentally peeps on Pop and gets kicked in the face for his trouble, and whilst he babbles on trying to make excuses, we get a look at the schedule, which really is packed up. When does he actually have time to fly around and fight bad guys anyway if he's always at photo shoots, interviews, and dinner parties? After they leave, Koichi and Pop actually reflect on what he said to them about not getting involved because in the end they just get in the way, and here the episode makes clear that this is going to be the new status quo. At minimum, the villains are going to be at the level of the full body transformation, which is currently leagues above where Koichi is at in terms of his combat abilities. Thus, I think during the course of Season 2, they're really going to have to up the ante of him getting much stronger, because right now, it feels like he's made so little progress. I'm not saying he needs to be Deku level, as I like that he is a perennial underdog in pretty much all of his fights, but that being said, it's not exactly fun when he has to be saved by a pro hero every single time. Eventually, as the lead, he needs to step up and start developing his own powers. We know that he used to be able to fly before his mum slapped the ability right out of his head, and he did manage to briefly unlock it to save Makoto a couple of episodes ago, but even if it was just him showcasing combat awareness and battlefield intelligence to take down villains much stronger than him, that would be great. We then move on to a scene that was honestly pretty boring to me. It's the final episode. Do I want to have a scene where the detective guy talks to Aizawa and Midnight about how the instant villains are getting worse and worse? With Aizawa speculating that this is all building to some greater goal? Not really. I feel as if we, the audience, already know all of this and it didn't add anything fresh. We know that all these villains are ultimately expendable, because this is being funded by All for One, who we know from the main show has assets all over and the willingness to burn them at a moment's notice if he needs to. Also, why were only Aizawa and Midnight at this meeting? Like I said earlier, it does seem to be getting to the point where it's time to call in one of your big hitters or your big case-solving heroes to get to the bottom of all this. I get that the audience knows these two characters, but it does feel somewhat out of place in that way. From here, we start to get to some of the drama of the episode, at last. This follows two intersecting storylines. On the one hand, Captain Celebrity and Ingenium are filming a commercial or a public service announcement, albeit a very dramatic one, that heralds the grand reopening of the Narahata section of the Expressway. Since Captain Celebrity is a bit of a diva and wants to look good, the fact that his hair fell across his face for a mere frame makes the entire shoot unusable. And so they get ready to go another round, whilst the villain prepares to make a move of his own. Also, how does this dude keep infiltrating so many supposedly secure locations and nobody calls him out? He somehow bluffed his way into being a cop, and now he's a member of this film crew and nobody has anything to say? Nothing at all? Sure. Meanwhile, Pop and Feathers have thrown together another Narufest to continue to bolster their profiles, and have brought in some new talent this time in the form of a trio of little singing girls. However, Feathers, banking on the arrival of Captain Celebrity, has been telling these little girls that they're going to be able to meet a real-life hero. But of course, we know that there's no chance that he's actually going to make an appearance because he's at the shoot. Thus, they have to improvise. Tell you what though, they are damn lucky Koichi exists at all, because this dude has pulled Narufest out of a bind again and again. This whole sequence has got to be one of the funniest things that's come out of the show this season. Koichi simply arriving to enjoy some music and leech a free lunch, only to get stuffed into his costume and shoved out onto the stage to do an appearance, before deciding that instead of doing an inspirational speech or showing off his moves, he wants to sing and dance. And not be half bad at it either, whilst also getting extremely into it. You can really tell that this is a come-down episode to send the season off on a bit of a high after a fairly dark episode last week, can't you? And I have to say that although maybe I would have liked a bit more plot, this part was so funny that it just elevates everything else by association. Also, I love that week by week it seems that Koichi's secret identity just becomes less and less secret, to the point that I'm pretty sure that even pro heroes besides Captain Celebrity and Ingenium know who he is. And that's as well as the whole cast of Narufest from last week. Dude's gonna get himself arrested if he ain't careful. We then cut over to the film shoot where they're doing a third take of their ad, when the mysterious villain springs his trap by crashing a truck into the production trucks with the intention of both attempting to kill the film crew, but also to release the Bat villain Roadrunner guy back into the world. And off he goes. He's flying around when he encounters Ingenium and kicks him, and yes, it's exactly how it sounds. It's very basic, it's very anticlimactic, and it didn't actually hurt Ingenium at all. But I guess it does go to show in storyline that this form of trigger makes you extremely stupid, because he clearly attacked with the intention to kill, and he actually thinks that Ingenium is dead now. And so off he goes in search of Koichi and Knuckle Duster, seeking to do the same to them. Unluckily for Koichi, he's singing and bats have good hearing, and so he swoops in and catches him, only to be immediately one-shotted by Captain Celebrity, who saves Koichi yet again from an embarrassing defeat, restores the status quo of their relationship by mocking Koichi and calling him boy, and then showboating and claiming the glory and love of the crowd at Narufest, when it was actually Koichi who was the special guest. Oh, poor Crawler. He pretty much never gets a win, does he? Even when he triumphs, he gets punked out later in that very same episode. From here, we start to get into the endgame of the episode and the season itself. Upon their return to Koichi's house, they discover that Knuckle Duster seemingly come by and left behind his Knuckle Dusters and his mask, obviously signaling to us that he's finished as a vigilante, at least for the time being. Rather humorously though, Koichi doesn't quite get that, and instead assumes that he just wants them cleaned. Although we do see via flashback that yeah, he actually is retiring. After all, he started to get a bit more distant towards the end of their time together, and was seemingly just making sure that Koichi was ready to go it alone before he hangs it up, and permanently moves on to support his daughter in her recovery. I do wonder, is this going to be the permanent status quo of the show going forward? Or is he going to get drawn back in? In Koichi's flashback, which seems to have been set in the aftermath of Narufest, he was just there to make sure the trigger users were done and dusted, and that it wasn't going to come back. And it seems that the villains they were fighting were just regular crooks. Now though, those new transformed trigger users are out and about. So I do wonder if that's going to pull him back in. A desire to get to the bottom of what happened and who really targeted his daughter in the first place. To discover who it is that's running the show and commanding the bee thing that possessed Tamo. Makoto swings by and briefly chats with Koichi and Pop before we cut over to the hospital where we get to see the aftermath of Knuckle Duster using his defib machine on his daughter after briefly killing her to kill the Queen Bee. Father of the year right here. He was already known to be a poor quality father before she was abducted, having been around rather rarely, forcing his wife to deal with his daughter when he didn't want to, and yelling at Tamo that she wasn't acting how he thought that she should be, prioritizing playing music over her future. Not a great start as a dad, but hey, he went full vigilante and saved her life, so that has to count for something. Except then he leaves her alone with Soga the creep when she's unconscious in hospital. What's the matter with this dude? Anyway, it seems that he's still going to be working with him going forward in some capacity because he tells him that he's going to be in touch. Ugh. I will admit though that this next part with him fussing over Tamo, giving her food, telling her to rest, and gently breaking the news that her mum can't come and see her, with a flashback revealing that she died not long after he saved Tamo, was a very emotional scene. Man, who's cutting the onions in here? It was such a beautiful sequence. Then when he's crouching down and he's telling Tamo that everything's okay because I am here, the same thing that he says when he drops in on villains to give them a beating, it was just so heartbreakingly beautiful. I wasn't expecting it to get to me like that, but it did. Great writing, great delivery, plus the music enhanced things too. Back over to Koichi's place, we have a sweet little scene that wraps everything up, where we start to see time slowly pass, with Koichi, Pop and Makoto continuing to hang out, and Koichi starting to grow into his role as the sole protector of Naruhara, being able to take down villains all on his own, but still taking a beating as he does so. I'm guessing that we're due for a brief time skip from seasons 1 to 2, and that Koichi's probably going to get a bit stronger when the season starts. Strong enough that Nakodasa doesn't have to arrive in episode 1 to save the day, because I think that reduces the impact of this ending where he's just gone from their lives. I do suspect he comes back to help fight a really tough villain maybe halfway through season 2 or even towards the end of the season, but that might be pushing it. And so, that's a wrap on season 1 of My Hero Academia Vigilantes. As I said at the start of this video, I haven't always thought that highly on some of the choices that were made in the story, and I don't think it comes close to season 1 of the main series. But regardless, I've had a lot of fun, and I'm definitely going to miss watching it week to week. So with all that being said, that's the end of the episode, and these have all been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of the episode and the season in general? Did you like it? Hate it? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.